I had given the order to ride out and die, and I meant to keep it. 12 winters I had been king of Vardholt, and 11 of them I had ruled a hold that felt like a house after a funeral, every hall too large, every voice too loud, and my own heart a cold banked coal that gave off no warmth I could find. My wolf had gone silent the night I buried the mate the moon never gave me a chance to know, and in all the years since he had not so much as lifted his head. A king with a sleeping wolf is a strange, halved thing. The pack feels it. They followed me out of duty and fear, not love, and I did not blame them. That morning the war had come for us at last. Where the frozen pass climbed out of our valley, the cairn had massed under a banner of gray. 3 packs sworn into one, more wolves than Vardholt had swords, come to take the pass and the hold and the salt road beyond it. My captains had spread the maps across the war table until dawn, and every path they traced ended the same way. We were too few. We would hold the pass a day, perhaps 2, and then we would be overrun. So I chose the thing a hollow man chooses. I would ride to the pass at the head of my strongest, and I would make the cairn pay so dearly for the first mile that they might think twice about the second. It was not a plan to win. It was a plan to die well, and to buy the old and the young behind our walls a little time to run. I had told no one that last part. But my captains were not fools, and the silence in the yard as they armored their wolves told me they had counted the same numbers I had. I stood in the cold of the mustering yard while they buckled the war steel onto me, plate over mail over the old scars, and I felt nothing but the weight of it. The horns had sounded. The column was forming along the road to the gate, rank on rank of mounted wolves breathing steam into the black morning, 300 strong and every one of them worth more than the king who was spending them. My own horse stamped and blew. Above us the banners of Vardholt hung stiff with frost, the gray wolf on black, and I looked at them and thought, "This is the last morning I will see you fly." I swung up into the saddle. My wolf did not stir. I had stopped expecting him to. "Open the gate," I said, and my voice went out flat over the yard, and men moved to the great iron-bound doors and set their shoulders to the bars. The gate of Vardholt groans when it opens. It is a sound I had heard 10,000 times and never once heard truly, the way you never truly hear your own name. But it groaned open that morning onto the gray road and the white pass beyond, and I gathered my reins to lead 300 wolves out to their deaths, and I saw her. She was kneeling just past the threshold, at the edge of the road where the frost had not yet been churned to mud, and she was bent over a man who lay in the snow. I knew the man. Even at that distance, and in that light I knew him, Havar, the young scout I had sent north 4 nights past to count the cairn fires and come back with a number. He had come back. He had crawled the last mile of it, by the look of the red trail smeared behind him on the white, and he had reached the gate of his home in the hour it was flung open to send everyone else out to fight, and there he had fallen, and no one in the mustering madness had seen him. No one but her. She had a cloak of undyed wool wrapped twice around her against the cold, and her hands were bare in that black frost, and she had her palms pressed flat and hard against the wound in Havar's side where an arrow had gone through him, and she was leaning her whole slight weight into it to keep his blood inside his body. She did not look up at the horns. She did not look up at 300 armored wolves filling the road above her. She looked at the dying boy under her hands, and she held him, and her lips moved, though I heard no sound come from her. I have thought about that moment more than any other in my life, and I still cannot fully say what it did to me. Every man and wolf in that column was turned outward, toward the war, toward the killing we rode to do. She was the only living thing in the whole gray morning turned the other way, turned toward one boy, toward keeping one small life burning a little longer in a morning when the king himself had decided lives were coins to be spent. She asked no one for help. She had not been sent. There was no gain in it for her. She did not even seem to know that anyone watched. She simply could not ride past a dying man, and so she had knelt in the frost and put her bare hands into his blood, because that was the only thing in the world worth doing. And in my chest, for the first time in 12 years, something moved. I want to be precise about it, because it was not what the old songs say the bond is. It was not fire. It was not a thunderclap or a wolf rising in me with a howl. It was the opposite of all of that. It was as though a sound I had lived inside so long I had stopped hearing it. A low, grinding war drum that had been beating behind my ribs since the day I put my mate in the ground, went suddenly, utterly quiet. Between one breath and the next the noise stopped, and in the stillness where it had been I heard my own wolf lift his head. He did not growl, he did not lunge. He only rose slow the way a great old animal rises from a long sleep, and he turned his whole attention toward the woman kneeling in the frost, and something in him that I had thought dead said, without words, the plainest thing I have ever felt. There. That one, at last. My horse had carried me 3 steps out the gate before I knew I had stopped it. The column checked behind me with a great ragged jangle of harness. My captain, Ordulf, gray in the muzzle and grim in the face, who had buckled my armor with his own hands that morning like a man dressing a friend for burial, brought his horse up level with mine. "My king," he said low, "the pass we ride." I did not answer him. I could not have told him what I would have said. I was looking down at the woman, and now she had felt the shadow of us fall over her, and she lifted her face. She was not beautiful the way the court reckons it. She was pale and plain and worn thin by weather, with dark hair frozen at the ends and eyes the flat gray of the winter pass, and there was blood to her wrists, and a smear of it on her jaw where she had pushed her hair back. But she met my eyes without flinching, which almost no one in Vardholt did any more, and she did not beg, and she did not shrink. She looked at me the way she had looked at the boy, steadily, as at a problem she meant to solve, and then she looked deliberately down at Havar under her hands and back up at me, and I understood her as clearly as if she had shouted it. "This one is still alive. Are you going to help me, or are you going to ride over him?" "He is one of mine," I heard myself say. My voice came out rough. "The scout, he's one of mine." She nodded once, as if to say then act like it, and went back to pressing the wound. I came down off my horse. I do not know that I can make you feel how strange that was, to the men watching. The Iron King of Vardholt, armored for the last ride of his life, the column formed and the gate open, and the Warren hours ride away, climbing down out of the saddle in the churned frost to kneel beside a wandering woman and a boy who by every cold reckoning was already dead. Ordulf made a sound. Behind me 300 wolves shifted and murmured. I heard the word pass down the ranks like wind through barley. "The king has stopped. The king has dismounted. What is the king doing?" And I found I did not care what any of them thought, which was itself a feeling so unfamiliar I hardly recognized it. I knelt in the blood and the cold beside her. Up close she smelled of wood smoke and crushed yarrow and something under it, some clean deep note that went into my chest and turned the key in a lock I had not known was there. And my wolf pressed close behind my eyes, and I had to breathe carefully for a moment to steady myself. "Tell me what to do," I said. She looked at me, one flick of those gray eyes, surprised, I think, that a king had asked, and then she took one of my mailed hands in both of her small, bloody ones and set it where hers had been, hard against the wound, and pressed down over my fingers to show me the pressure it needed, and held them there until she was sure I had it. Her hands were freezing. She had been out here long enough that the cold had gone bone-deep into her, and still they did not shake. Then she reached into a satchel at her hip and drew out a roll of clean linen and a wooden box no bigger than my fist, and she went to work. I have seen battlefield healers, hold healers, the trembling apprentices who cut arrows out of screaming men. I had never seen anything like her. She worked fast and sure and entirely without waste, and she worked in complete silence, no muttered prayers, no called orders, none of the noise that others make to keep their own fear at bay. She packed the wound. She had me lift the boy so she could pass the linen under and around him, binding my own hand into the dressing until the pressure held itself. She put a paste to his lips that made his breath ease. And all through it her mouth moved, shaping words, and no sound came. And I realized with a slow, cold understanding that it was not silence she was keeping by choice. She had no voice. Whatever had taken it, it was long gone. She spoke with her hands and her eyes and the set of her jaw, and she had learned to make the world understand her without a single word, and the world, busy, loud, at war, had mostly not bothered to try. But the boy under our hands drew a breath, and then another, and the gray began to leave his face. He was not saved. But he was not dying, not this minute, and she sat back on her heels and let out a long breath that plumed white in the black air. And for one moment she closed her eyes, and I saw how tired she was. Tired the way the very good are tired, all the way down. "He'll live?" I asked. She opened her eyes and tilted her hand in the air, maybe, if he's warm, if he's watched, and looked toward the gate, toward the hold with a question in her face. "Ordulf," I did not turn. "Get Havar inside. To the hearth hall, not the healer's cold room, a fire, blankets, someone with him every hour. Go yourself, see it done." There was a silence behind me. I understood it. I was giving my grimmest captain a nursemaid's errand while the column stood armed for war. But Ordulf had known me 30 years, since before I was iron, and I heard him dismount without a word. And I heard the change in him as he did it, the smallest thing, a loosening. And I understood later that what he had heard in my voice was a king giving an order to save someone, and that he had not heard me give such an order in a very long time. They carried the boy in. The woman rose to go with him. Of course she did. He was her patient. Her whole self was already turned to follow him, and it was only as she gathered her satchel and turned that I saw she meant to walk into the hold, tend the boy, and then walk back out and away, down the road into the war country, on to the next dying stranger and out of my life. She had done what was in front of her. She did not know she had done anything else at all. I caught her wrist, gently, barely, the way you would stop a bird from leaving your open hand. She went still and looked back at me, not afraid, waiting. And I, who had ridden out that morning to die, who had a war an hour up the road and 300 armed wolves at my back, and a plan built entirely on the idea that I had nothing left in the world to lose. I looked at this silent woman with a stranger's blood on her hands and my own wolf awake in my chest for the first time in 12 years. And I understood all at once, and with the force of a thing that has always been true, that I had been wrong. I had something to lose. I had just met her. The horns sounded again, further down the column, the signal to move, given by some captain who could not see why we had not. My horse tossed its head. The pass waited, and the gray banner, and the death I had promised everyone. I did not let go of her wrist. "Wait," I said, "please just wait." She studied my face for a long moment. Whatever she found there, it made her stop. She looked down at my hand on her wrist, and up at me, and then, slowly, with the wariness of someone who has learned that stopping to help usually costs her something, she gave the smallest nod and she waited. And the king's whole war stood still on the road, while a hollow man tried to find the words for a thing he had never once in his life had to say. Her name was Wren. I learned it the way you learn everything about Wren, in pieces, patiently, by watching. She could not tell me, so she showed me. When I brought her into the hearth hall behind Havar's litter, and the column stood down in confusion, and my captains gathered around me with faces full of questions I did not yet have answers for, she ignored all of it and set herself at the boy's side by the fire. And she would not be moved until his color held and his breath steadied, and she had watched him long enough to trust it. Only then did she let me put a cup of hot broth into her frozen hands, and only then did she look up and around the hall and truly see, I think, where she was and who I was and what she had walked into the middle of. I sent everyone out. That in itself set the hall murmuring, the king and the mute stranger, alone by the fire on the morning of the war, but I did not care. I have said I stopped caring what they thought, and I mean it. Something had burned that fear out of me at the gate. I sat down across the hearth from her, still in my war steel, because there had been no moment to take it off, and I said, "I don't know how to talk to you. Show me how." She looked at me a while. Then she set down the broth, and she reached again into that endless satchel, and she drew out a little folded square of scraped hide and a stub of charcoal, and she wrote, "You were writing to die." Not a question. She had seen the column, seen the numbers in it, seen the way men sit a horse when they do not expect to sit it again by nightfall. She had knelt at the gate in the middle of an army riding to its death, and she had understood the whole of it in a glance, and chosen the boy anyway. "Yes," I said, there was no use lying to those gray eyes. "The Karn are in the pass, 3 packs, more than we can hold. I meant to make them pay for the first mile and buy the hold time to run." She wrote, and now. And there it was, the whole question of my life set down in charcoal on a scrap of hide by a woman who could not speak it aloud. And now that I had climbed down off the horse, now that my wolf was awake, now that the drum behind my ribs had gone quiet for the first time in 12 years, and I could hear myself think. And what I could hear myself thinking was that a plan to die well is only a good plan for a man who has nothing to live for. And I was, suddenly and terribly, no longer that man. "I don't know," I said honestly. "You've ruined it." Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile. I would not earn a smile from Wren for many days yet, but the ghost of the place a smile would someday be. She wrote, "Good." I laughed. It came out of me cracked and rusty, a sound I did not know I still owned, and it startled us both. I will not pretend the war went away because I had found her. It did not. The Karn were still in the pass, still 3 packs strong, and every hour I sat by that fire was an hour they dug in deeper. But something had changed in the shape of the problem, and it took me until midday to understand what it was. And when I understood it, I sent for my captains and my maps, and I laid it all out on the hearth table. And Wren sat in the corner watching with her gray eyes and her scrap of hide, missing nothing. Here is what had changed. When I had planned to die, I had planned like a dying man, grandly, wastefully, all or nothing, one glorious, ruinous charge. A man with something to lose plans differently. A man with something to lose is careful. And when I made myself look at the pass again, not as a place to die, but as a place to hold, and protect, and keep, I began to see things I had been too hollow to see. The pass was narrow. That was death for an army that meant to charge out and meet the Karn in the open, which is what they would expect of the Iron King, whose reputation was all iron and no cunning. But it was salvation for an army that meant to make the Karn come to us, through a gap where their numbers could not be brought to bear all at once, where 3 packs would have to funnel into a killing ground 100 wolves wide, and be met by a wall that did not have to be large, only unbreakable. I had the high ground. I had the walls of the old watchtowers that flanked the pass, long abandoned, that a handful of archers could hold. I had a valley behind me full of people who, if I gave them a reason and a night, could raise barricades and haul stone and turn the mouth of the pass into a throat that would choke the Karn on their own numbers. I had been so busy dying that I had forgotten how to fight to live. "We don't ride out," I told my captains, and I watched the disbelief move across their faces and then the slow dawning hope behind it. "We make them come to us, through the narrows, where their numbers are worth nothing and every stone of that pass is worth 10 wolves. We hold the towers, we wall the throat, we turn their strength into the thing that kills them." I set my hand flat on the map. "We fight to keep what's ours, and we make the ground do the killing." Ordulf stared at the map a long moment. Then he looked up at me, and there was something in his old gray face I had not seen turned on me in years. "That could work," he said, low, wondering. "By the moon, my king, that could actually work." And then, more quietly, just for me, "What happened to you at the gate?" I looked across the hall at Wren, who was watching us with her charcoal still in her hand, and I did not answer him in words. But he followed my glance, and he was not a stupid man, and I saw him understand, and I saw the old warrior's face soften into something almost like a smile. "We worked through the day and into the night. I sent riders to every farm and steading in the valley, not with a call to flee but with a call to build, and the valley answered. They came with axes and oxen and sledges of stone, hundreds of them, because it is one thing to run from a king who means to die and another thing entirely to build a wall for a king who means to save you. Wren went among the ones who came hurt, and the ones who worked themselves to injury, and she healed them with those silent, sure hands, and I watched the valley folk learn her the way I was learning her. By what she did, since she could not tell them, and I watched them come to love her for it faster than they had ever come to love me. She stayed. That was the thing I kept returning to in the cold hours, marshaling the defense of the throat of the pass. She had meant to walk on. She had done her one act of mercy at the gate and meant to vanish down the road to the next one, and she had every reason to. A war was coming, and she owed Vardholt nothing, and she had learned, I came slowly to understand, that places did not keep her. A voiceless healer is useful, and then forgotten. She had been passed hand to hand down the cold roads of the north her whole life, valued for her hands and never once for herself. Never kept, never chosen, always moving on before anyone bothered to learn her name. And I had asked her to wait, and she had waited. And every hour she did not leave, I felt my wolf settle deeper and surer in my chest, and I knew, the way you know a true thing in the marrow before you will let yourself say it, what she was to me. I told her on the second night. We were on the wall above the throat of the pass, where the great barricade was rising stone by stone under torchlight, and she had come up to stand beside me in the cold to look at the thing the valley had built in a day and a night. It was nearly done. In the morning the Karn would come, and they would break themselves on it, and I believed now, I truly believed, that we would hold. She stood beside me with her undyed cloak wrapped twice around her, and the torchlight caught the frost in her dark hair and turned it to a scatter of small stars, and I looked at her and could not hold it in any longer. "I have to tell you something," I said, "and I have no gift for saying it, so I will just say it plainly and you will have to forgive the roughness of it." She turned those gray eyes to me and waited, the way she waited, giving me all her attention and no pressure at all. 12 years ago I lost the woman the moon meant for me before I ever truly knew her, and the wolf in me went to sleep and I stopped feeling things. I have been a cold king for a long time. I rode out yesterday morning meaning to die because I could not think of a single reason worth living for. I made myself hold her gaze. And then the gate opened, and there you were in the frost with your bare hands in a dying boy's blood, asking nothing, turned away from the whole loud war toward the one small life in front of you. And my wolf woke up. He has not woken in 12 years, Wren, and he woke for you, and I know what that means, what you are to me. She had gone very still. The charcoal was in her hand, but she did not write. She looked at me, and for the first time since the gate I saw something move behind her steadiness, something she had kept locked down as hard as I had kept mine, a wariness, a bracing, the flinch of a person who has been disappointed by every warm word ever spoken to her. Slowly she raised the scrap of hide and wrote, and turned it to me, and her hand was not quite steady. People say things they don't mean when they're afraid to die. It cut me because it was fair. Yes, I said, they do, so I'll prove I mean it, and I'll give you the only proof that's worth anything. I turned to face her fully. Tomorrow the Carn come and we hold, and after whether you feel for me what I feel for you or whether you feel nothing at all, you are not a thing that gets used and passed on. Not here, not ever again. If you want to stay, Vardholt is yours, and the place at my side is yours, and my name is yours to take. And if you want to go, you will go with a good horse and a full pack and an honor guard and gold enough that no one ever again makes you earn your bread with your hands in a stranger's blood on a frozen road. You will be chosen either way. That is the proof. I am not asking you to stay so that I have something. I am telling you that you are free so that if you stay, I will know you chose it. She read it read my face, more than the words, and I watched the wariness in her waver, and I watched her not quite let herself believe it, and I did not push. I had learned that much of her already. You do not push, Wren. You wait, and you let her come to the truth in her own time, the way she had let the boy at the gate come back to life under her patient hands. She wrote one more thing that night, before she went down off the wall. No one has ever told me I was free. Then she folded the hide away, and she looked at me a long moment with those winter-gray eyes, and she reached out, hesitant, testing. And she laid her small, cold hand flat against the war steel over my heart, the way she had set my hand to the wound at the gate. Just for a moment. Feeling, I think, whether the thing inside me she had woken was truly there. And my wolf rose to meet her palm through all that iron, and I saw her feel it, saw her eyes widen, and then she took her hand back and turned and went down into the torchlight and left me on the wall with my heart pounding like a boy's. I did not sleep that night, but it was not the war that kept me awake. The Carn came with the dawn, as I knew they would, and it went as I had planned it, which is the rarest thing in war. They came expecting the Iron King they had heard of, the grim fool who would ride out and meet them in the open and die on their spears in a blaze of useless glory. When instead they found the mouth of the pass walled and toothed and bristling with archers in the old towers, they hesitated, and a hesitating army at the neck of a narrow place is already half beaten. Their captains chose to force it anyway. They had the numbers, and numbers make men brave in the wrong ways. They funneled their wolves into the throat of the pass, 3 packs worth of fighters crushed into a killing ground 100 wide, and they broke themselves on our wall exactly as the stone and the ground and the cold arithmetic of the Narrows said they would. I fought on the wall that day, and I fought like a man who wanted to come home from it, which is to say carefully and well, and beside my wolves instead of ahead of them into death. My wolf was with me the whole of it, awake and fierce and present, and I had forgotten what it was to fight as a whole man instead of a hollow one. We held the throat through the morning. By midday the Carn's numbers, which were meant to be their strength, had become their ruin. They could not bring their weight to bear, they could not retreat cleanly through the press of their own ranks, and when I judged the moment right, I sent the sortie I had hidden in the flanking tower down into their crush, and their line broke, and it became a rout. I let most of them run. A dying king kills everything. A living king who means to keep his valley knows that a broken enemy allowed to flee carries home a warning worth more than a field of the dead. We took the pass. We held the Salt Road. Vardholt lost fewer wolves in that whole day than I had planned to lose in the first hour of my glorious, ruinous charge, and every one of them we did lose, we lost holding something instead of throwing it away. And through all of it, at the back of the wall in the healer's station we had built into the lee of the tower, Wren worked. I could not watch her, I had a battle to fight, but I knew she was there, the way you know the sun is up behind clouds. Every wolf pulled bleeding off the wall came to her hands. She kept men alive that day who had no business living, with the same silent sureness she had shown the boy at the gate. And when the fighting was done and I came down off the wall bloodied and shaking and alive, more alive than I had been in 12 years, I found her among the wounded with blood to her elbows and exhaustion graven into every line of her, still working, still turned toward the next life that needed her. I did not go to her then. She had work, and a healer in the middle of her work is not to be interrupted for a king's heart. I waited. I had learned to wait for Ren. It was full dark before she finished, before the last wound was bound and the last dying man was made either to live or to die easy. She came out of the healer's station into the cold and the torchlight, and she stopped when she saw me waiting there for her, and we looked at each other across the churned and bloody ground much as we had looked at each other across the boy at the gate 2 mornings before. Everything was different now. Nothing was different at all. I went to her. I took off my war cloak, the gray wolf on black, the king's own cloak, the one I had put on to die in, and I laid it around her shoulders over her thin undyed wool, and I did not say anything because there was nothing to say that the cloak did not say better. You are cold. You are chosen. You are mine to keep and mine to protect, and I will put the king's own warmth around you before I put it around myself. She looked down at the gray wolf on the black wool over her shoulders. She looked up at me, and she reached into her satchel one more time and drew out the scrap of hide and wrote in the torchlight and turned it to me. I have kept that scrap of hide. It is the most valuable thing I own, worth more to me than the pass or the salt road or the crown. It said in her patient charcoal hand, "You turned the horse around." "I did," I said. My voice was not steady. She wrote, "Everyone else was riding to die. You climbed down for one boy." And then, below it, after a moment, in smaller strokes, as if she could barely let herself set it down, "I have walked 1,000 miles of road, and no one ever turned around for me." "I will turn around for you," I said, "every day of my life." "That is what I am telling you. That is the whole of it." I took her small cold hands in mine, blood and all, and I held them the way she had held the boy, hard so she would feel the truth of it through her skin. "Stay, not because Vardholt needs a healer, though it does, not because I need a queen, though the moon knows I do. Stay because you are free to go, and I am asking you anyway, and I will spend the rest of my days making sure you never once regret being chosen. Stay, Ren. Be the thing my wolf woke for. Be the calm at my gate for the rest of our lives." She looked at me for a long, long time. The torches guttered. Somewhere behind us, the hold was beginning, hesitantly, to understand that it had lived through the day, that the Iron King had ridden out to die and come home to reign, and that some of it had to do with the silent woman in the king's gray cloak. And Ren, who had no voice, who had been passed down the cold roads her whole life, who had knelt in the frost for a stranger's boy because she could not do otherwise, who had never once in all her days been told that she was free, Ren smiled at me. The first true smile. It broke over that plain, tired, beloved face like dawn coming up over the pass, and it was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, more beautiful than any war won or crown worn, and my wolf sang in my chest to see it. She let go of my hands. She lifted the scrap of hide once more, and she wrote a single word, and she showed it to me, and then she stepped into the circle of my arms, and the king's gray cloak closed around us both. The word she wrote was, "Chosen." I am an old king now, or growing old, and the pass has been quiet for many years, and Vardholt is a warm hold again, full of noise I can bear because she is at the center of it. My wolf has never gone back to sleep. Havar, the boy at the gate, grew into my finest captain and named his first daughter for the woman who kept his blood inside his body on a frozen morning. And every year on the anniversary of that day, when the frost first comes to the pass, my queen and I ride out to the gate together at dawn, and we stop at the place where she knelt, and we say nothing, she because she cannot, and I because there is nothing that needs saying. We only sit our horses a while in the cold, side by side, and remember the morning the gate groaned open onto a war, and a silent woman turned the other way, and a hollow king climbed down out of the saddle, and for the first and last and best time in his life, turned his horse around.